Stories, Philippines Podcast.
There are shadows that fall across the land, cold and thick and utterly terrifying. They are not cast by the ancient balete tree or the wandering souls of a war-torn hill. These shadows are human in origin, manufactured in air-conditioned offices, signed off on with expensive pens, and paid for with the stolen hope of an entire nation. They are the true horrors, the ones that defy the comfort of the supernatural because they are purely, chillingly real. A darkness permeates this episode, touching on scenes and themes some may find profoundly disturbing. Listen with necessary caution. I am Paul, and you are listening to Stories Philippines podcast. This is the third and final part of our special for Halloween 2025. We conclude our descent into fear, not with a monster from folklore, but with the most frightening monster of all, the relentless, systematic greed and corruption of the human heart, the horror that is political malfeasance. In the Philippines, the language of corruption is often borrowed from the paranormal. We speak of ghost projects, infrastructures that appear only on official documents, built of nothing but paper and stolen funds. We talk about ghost employees, names on a payroll who collect salaries but whose desks remain perpetually empty. These are not just metaphors for fraud. They are a horrifying mirror of the Filipino belief in the multo, or the invisible entity. The money is paid out to a phantom, and the lack of a real structure leaves a real gaping hole in the community. Consider the ongoing devastating scandal of the ghost flood control projects. For years, massive amounts of public money, trillions of pesos, have been allocated to prevent the Philippines, an archipelago battered by typhoons, from drowning. But when the rains come, the floodwaters rise and homes are destroyed. Why? Because the money meant for concrete, drainage, and protective seawalls was siphoned off, swallowed by a complex web of corrupt politicians, engineers, and favored contractors. Imagine a coastal village named, for example, Barangay San Gabriel in the Bicol region. The inhabitants, people like Aling Rosita and Mang Pedro, are simple folk whose lives are governed by the cycle of the sun and the terror of the storm. They have been promised a strong, vital flood wall for years. Money is budgeted, contractors are paid. On paper, the project is 80% complete. But in reality, the wall is a pitiful, crumbling stretch of substandard concrete that barely reaches 2 feet high before it dissolves into rubble. When Typhoon Ursula hits, the water surges in, claiming the meager possessions of Aling Rosita, destroying Mang Pedro's small fishing boat, and displacing their family for weeks. The ghost in this story is not the spirit of a drowned man. The ghost is the invisible 20-foot-high wall that was supposed to save them. The monster is the bureaucrat in a distant city who, by signing a fraudulent completion report, effectively pointed the wave toward their home. This level of human-generated horror, where an act of greed directly translates into death and ruin, is far more terrifying than any fictional monster. The Manananggal, the vampire-like witch of Filipino legend, might take a single unborn child. But the corrupt politician, through a simple line item in a budget, can doom thousands of children to a future without hospitals, without strong schools, and with the constant gnawing fear of the next disaster. This is a global pattern, a shadow that falls across every nation. Think of the Chernobyl disaster in the 1986. The catastrophic failure of the nuclear reactor was compounded by a government system founded on secrecy, denial, and the prioritization of political narrative over human safety. The radiation was the physical disaster, but the horror was the human mechanism that ensured the truth remained buried, sacrificing the health of countless citizens to maintain a political facade. The ghost of Chernobyl is the official lie that led to 100,000 premature deaths. In the Philippines, the ghost is often attached to the idea of ill-gotten wealth, a phrase that carries the weight of decades of systemic plunder. The sheer scale of wealth allegedly stolen by political families, hidden in Swiss banks, or invested in foreign real estate is so vast it strains the imagination. The theft is not a simple crime, it is an act of economic sabotage that has retarded the country's development, ensuring that poverty remains an inescapable reality for millions. To understand the horror, you must look at the consequence. When a politician takes a 50% kickback on a hospital project, that means the final structure will use 50% less quality material and 50% less essential equipment. The horror is in the faulty electrical wiring, the surgical instruments that break, and the missing oxygen tanks. The Ghost Project is not just about missing cement. It is about a character like Julian, a 30-year-old tricycle driver whose father, Mang Lucio, needs a vital operation. Mang Lucio is taken to the newly built regional hospital, but Julian watches in helpless terror as the life support machine malfunctions, sputtering and failing when his father needs it most. The machine was cheap, the procurement officer was rich. The horror is Julian's scream, knowing his father's death was signed off years before on a balance sheet. This culture of impunity, where the perpetrators protected by their own power and wealth, creates a profound psychological fear in the public. It is a fear that the entire world is rigged against the powerless. The system itself becomes a malevolent entity, a kaphe, the tree giant of Filipino lore, not dwelling in a ballet tree, but residing in the marbled halls of government. Smoking an expensive cigar and watching as the small folk suffer. The giant is too big to fight, too entrenched to dislodge. This societal horror is compounded by the spectacle of the corrupt flaunting their wealth. There is a deep, agonizing resentment that bubbles up when the children of these officials, dubbed Nepo babies by the outraged youth, display their obscene luxury on social media. They post photographs of designer bags, private jets, and lavish parties, their smiles blindingly bright against the backdrop of a nation struggling with rising sea levels and stagnant wages. The visible cruelty of this contrast is a kind of spiritual violence. It is the modern-day equivalent of the Spanish friars' opulence set against the starving peasants of the 19th century. The wealth is not just money, it is concentrated power. The flaunting of it is a deliberate act of psychological oppression, a cold, hard reminder that the rules apply only to those who cannot afford to break them. There are moments when the suppressed anger finds a voice. We saw it in the massed and peaceful and persistent protests, the trillion-peso marches that flood the streets, demanding accountability for the theft of climate adaptation funds. This collective mobilization is the nation's way of saying the haunting must stop. It is a spiritual defense against the very human forces that seek to paralyze society with fear and corruption. We seek to tell these stories because silence is the greatest ally of this type of horror. We must turn a clear, unflinching eye toward the darkness and give voice to the victims whose suffering is not acknowledged in police reports or official inquiries. If you have a story of a ghost project that never materialized, a ghost employee who collects a salary meant for essential services, or a personal experience of how bureaucratic greed has altered the course of your life, we encourage you to share it. Submit your stories to our email, storiesphpodcast@gmail.com. The terror of the supernatural is temporary. It can be dispelled by light or salt or a simple prayer. But the terror of human corruption is permanent. It is the inherited curse, the darkness woven into the very contracts and documents that govern our lives. Access exclusive content on Patreon, where we discuss the roots of this systemic corruption and the historical periods that allowed this horror to flourish. Follow us on social media for daily folklore facts. We have explored the monuments of misery, the silence of the unsolved, and now the profound horror of human action. The lingering question remains the same, regardless of whether the monster wears a shroud or a tailored suit. If the most powerful demons on earth are merely men and women, what salvation can truly be found in prayer? There is no more unfortunate creature under the sun than a two-legged creature whom someone has persuaded that a lie is the truth. Do not forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share this podcast. Support the podcast financially in ways you can find in the show notes. This has been Paul, and you are listening to Stories Philippines Podcast. Happy Halloween to everyone. And do not forget, we will not be silenced until this ghosts in the government has been exorcised.